One thing for sure is that access to mobility is access to livelihoods, and mobility is not a solved problem. Solving for access to mobility is a large and hard problem. And we also believe that we alone can't solve for this problem.
Hello and welcome to the Startup Operator podcast. I'm Roshan Cariappa. Hope you guys had a fantastic Diwali. Now, last mile mobility in India is a huge problem and is absolutely critical for our growth. As our guest on the podcast said, access to mobility is access to livelihoods. I spoke to Vivekananda Hallekere, who is the CEO and co-founder of Bounce, which is solving this very important problem. Bounce is a dockless two-wheeler rental solution which allows users to book a vehicle, drive it to their destination, and simply leave it there. All of it enabled through a smart mobile app. As you can imagine, it's fairly operations intensive and it requires phenomenal execution chops to scale the logistics and optimize the economics of the business. And recently, Bounce has also forayed into the EV space to improve form factor. I spoke about all of this and more in this very lively and insightful conversation with Vivek. I'm sure you'll like it, so do check it out. Hey Vivek, welcome to the Startup Operator podcast. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thanks, man. Thanks for inviting.
Yeah. So Vivek, I know you've been doing fantastic work in the space, right? Solving for last mile mobility and now EV and everything. But I want to start with some background, right? How do you go from being a chartered accountant to an entrepreneur? Was this something that you always dreamed of or it just kind of happened?
To be honest, I don't know how that happened. But I think always wanted to, I think it was a gradual process, right? As in, when I was doing my CA, probably it was all about clearing CA and getting a job. But once I got into KPMG, I started figuring that whatever we were doing at KPMG is something that probably we could do better, and the market was large. We could recreate this for small, medium enterprises and startups. And that's how I took a plunge of quitting KPMG within a year of joining and deciding to start on my own. So once I was my own, I had the freedom and flexibility to think and figure out what I wanted to do. So while I was building my practice, always was an idea person. So I had a lot of ideas that I wanted to work on. So over a period of time, met a couple of friends who were also excited. We used to catch up for beer, discuss ideas that we felt that we should work on. And Wicked Ride was the craziest of all. So we thought, worst case, if it doesn't work out, we'll have a great motorcycle to share. So we started with one motorcycle, a Facebook page, and the journey started that way. And before that, we wanted to make beer brewing machines and sell it to people. We were also working on a expense which helps people manage their expense and reimbursements, like all that. So there were a bunch of ideas that we were working on, and Wicked Ride probably because it was crazy. We started off with that, and then we figured that while we scaled Wicked Ride, we figured that it's not going to be a huge business. So we wanted to do something else. So we stumbled across while we were thinking, how do we do something which is much larger, etc. We felt a mobility on two-wheelers can be really big. And these were the days when Gojek was just starting, as in they had just raised the Series A. But we were very clear that we don't want to do bike taxi because we felt the cost of human is always going to go up and managing humans is always tough. So we felt that if we can remove the human from the solution and do like what cycle sharing in New York was, as in city bikes was, if you can do it on two-wheelers, it probably might make sense. But dogs were the big challenge for even New York cycle sharing program. So we figured if we can not have dogs, it can be great where people can pick it up anywhere, drop it anywhere, etc. All that. So that's how the journey started, and that's where we are. Yeah.
Right. No, I was going to ask you about the ideas that didn't quite make it, and glad that you covered that. And I remember seeing your office in Indiranagar, if I'm correct, right? And every time I would slow down there, watch all the cool bikes and go past, right? So Wicked Rides was fun. You've had multiple different pivots along the way, right? From Wicked Rides to Bounce to now exploring EV. Right. I wonder if you can talk through some of the principles on how you decide to pivot, from one to another. How are you always thinking ahead about, what to do next, and how do you develop conviction on that?
There's been only one pivot so far for us. That was from luxury motorcycle rentals to deciding to solve for mobility. Once we decided to solve for mobility, it's just the form factor which has changed. We were on petrol scooters. Petrol scooters come with its own challenges. So we started investing in EV back in 2018. When it still wasn't a thing. And a lot of things fell in place for us because of the investments that we made in EV. And we had a lot of learnings because we used to have the demand, because of which it was very natural for us to take opportunity of COVID and probably sell off all our petrol scooters and deciding to double down. But I think as a company experiment a lot. We believe in experimenting and building backward and forward kind of integrations to make things stable and to make things better. So we as a company don't think that we should not be doing this, or we are not the right guys to do this. We always think, what does it take for us to solve this problem? And we go out and do whatever it takes to solve that problem. So we never hesitate. So for us, for mobility business to work, electric was important. So we went out scouting for electric scooters and who could help us. But once we figured that probably it will take its own sweet time for people to come and solve for us on these problems. So we figured that it's something that we have to do on our own. And we started with small bets. We kept a small allocation for that to experiment and figure out if we can pull it off, etc. Like that. So that's how we started. But more or less, we start with a simple why document. Someone comes up with a crazy idea. We ask them to think more on why should we be doing it. Does it go in sync with our core business, or is it something totally different? It doesn't have to do anything with the core business, but it's a good business to go out and explore or pilot. So we allow a lot of experiments to happen in Bounce because we believe that we have to stay relevant and we have to think on how do you build valuable businesses out there and solve for real problems. So that's how most of the things that we have been doing. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it works well for us.
If it works, right? So yeah, I mean, you bring up an important point, right, which is backing yourself and building through first principles. And this is especially relevant, a lot of people are building in a place where there are multiple incumbents, and oftentimes, I mean, they're respectful or even diffident to these people, right? So how do you do you have any advice for entrepreneurs who are like trying to build stuff through first principles? How should they go about doing this?
There's no advice to entrepreneurs. See, all of the gyan is out there, right? As in, there is enough information to say either ways, right? So I don't think there are any secret sauces or formulas which work, but it depends on what the entrepreneur or the founder wants to chase and solve for, right? As in, it boils down to what he and the founding team wants. As in, what are they set to solve for? As in, based on that, I think it's very specific to the companies. But one thing, whatever you're trying to do, give it time. Don't jump the gun. And there's gonna be ups and downs. So doesn't matter if it's a crowded market, doesn't matter if it's a virgin market. Just think through, and founders know the best. As in, make sure that you know everything around that, and keep iterating. Keep iterating. Don't be scared of what outside world has to say. It all has to be a lot more internal and consumers, and not the VC world or outside world view on what you're doing. So if you don't do things for peer pressure, life is easy, right? So they got to always focus on why are they doing it. They should have answers for it. If they don't have answers, they have to find answers for that. Other than that, I think there is nothing specific that I could add there. Just don't do anything for peer pressure or investors or because it's a trendy thing or anything like that. Yeah.
Right. So let's talk about the problem that you're solving, right? Last mile mobility in India is a huge problem, and it's probably an evergreen problem as well, right? So you must have done hundreds of thousands of rides in the last 6-7 years. What have you learned about some of the nuances of solving for last mile mobility in India?
Yeah, we've done close to about 20 crore kilometers of shared mobility. So that's close to about 25 million rides of 6 or 7 kilometers each. So we've done quite a bit of kilometers there. And unique users served. I think we used to have close to about 1.6 or 2 million transacting users in Bangalore alone. So quite a bit of fraction learning, etc. All of that. So learnings across, as in form factor learnings, have been very interesting. Tier 2, Tier 3 city learnings have been very different. So there have been all kinds of learnings. One thing for sure is that access to mobility is access to livelihoods, and mobility is not a solved problem. And we also believe that we alone can't solve for this problem because there are diverse use cases, there are diverse needs. And so there are more and more ways to solve for mobility, and mobility is a very interesting and big problem to solve for. So yeah, so we need more people who can come and solve for mobility as
it. Right. And you've also built a ton of technology in-house, right? From IoT to now, investing in EV ahead of time before it became cool, I would say, right? Yeah. So how do you go about choosing what to build and what to simply acquire or what to even ignore?
Various principles there, right? As in, if someone is ahead of us and they understand it better, probably either we get them to come and work with us, or we acquire them, or we see how can we make use of their services. So that is one. And also there is a lot of learning that we do here because we also don't know what is right, what is wrong at times. So you explore different technology, you talk to people, and times it's just gut call on which technology to invest in, etc. All that. So the whole world was not working on battery swapping as a technology, but we felt that primarily from our business point of view, we felt swapping becomes very important because range is something that we have to solve for, downtime is something we have to solve for. And we, knowing parking problems, we knew that there will never ever enough be parking space for vehicles to park and charge, right? Even if it means 10 seconds, the queuing theory kicks in. We felt that at scale, parking will never work. So we decided to go out and do swapping where batteries can be charged somewhere else and batteries can be moved around. So this was one choice that we made. So I don't know if there are any rule books, but we did things which we felt was relevant. We iterated, we understood. Probably our learnings of doing certain things also gave us answers. Yeah, I don't have an answer on if there is a rule book someone could follow. Yeah.
Right. I guess you have to develop your own, right? Based on
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
experience you have. The key word that defines Bounce for me is efficiency, right? And I think the central premise of, how and why you started Bounce is also the fact that, your scooters lie wasting for 23 hours of the day, right? And you probably use it only for an hour, and it could be more productive, more efficient during the entire lifetime, right? So this is also business where you have to pay a lot of attention to the bottom line. You have to be extremely capital efficient and figure out how to save paisas and rupees off of every kilometer of the ride, right? Can you give us some examples of how you have become more efficient on this front? How have you gone, how have you changed in the last 5 years?
Yeah. So I think this is a business where every paisa matters, right? So all our unit economics is in paisa. And I think that's nobody talks about paisa, but for us, all economics is in paisa, right? And also to give you an example, our ride value is close to $1 for, let's say, 6 kilometer ride distance. This is so tiny for someone in Europe where they charge almost €1 per minute. So the scale that the efficiency and things that we have to operate in is very different as compared to what our global peers operate in. So we have to operate at 7 times the efficiency, right? As in, because we charge $1 for a 7 kilometer ride where they probably charge per minute. It's probably more. They charge per minute per euro or something of that sort. And here, 40 minutes we are charging €1, so or lesser, right? So, and also we don't have a human form factor, which is great, but everything has to work and it has to work at scale. So it's a pure operations driven game where we look at everything and figure out how do we solve for this, as in how do we actually go out and reduce certain cost items, what is the economics, how can we drive it today. So there's a fully functional business finance team which focuses only on that, and we make all kinds of investment based on where we want to be. It can be switching from petrol to EV was because of economics as well, right? As in, while it's good for the environment, etc., but it was primarily economics driven thing for us to move to EV, where a lot of things which we hit a hard line in terms of how much we could save from petrol scooters, with EV, which was much more flexible for us. So all kinds of investments, all kinds of effort. When I say investment, both in money and effort, it's driven by unit economics and scalability and sustainability of certain numbers, right? So that's how we look at it. A business finance team drives it for us, and we all rally around that, making sure that it still solves a customer problem, and we figure out how do we go out and solve that.
Right. And given that it's extremely operations intensive, right? Scaling logistics is a huge challenge, and along the way, something that can hurt you a lot is theft and damage and things to that effect, right? But you have figured out innovative ways to solve for that. Could you talk about a couple of things that you've done?
Yeah, we did quite a bit of innovations to save either for theft or vandalism, etc. All of that. The biggest has been going out and working on electric scooter itself, right? That's the biggest investment and innovation that we've done to make sure that a lot of challenges around petrol theft or improper use, etc., all that goes up, because electric scooters are much more controllable because you can remotely shut down the motor or remotely shut down the battery, and you can make it redundant for anyone who's trying to use it as such. So one of the biggest investments that we've done is to build an electric scooter out there. But while we were running petrol scooters, we did quite a bit of innovation. For instance, to make sure that people don't steal fuel when it's parked or something of that, so that we get an alert. We used to have state-of-the-art petrol sensors that we had built. So sensors which could go all the way till 400 or 500 ml of variance. So that's the kind of things which are not available in the market. We worked on building those kind of things. And two-wheeler is a very different thing, right? As in, it moves, it should not give you false alarm. It slants when it's parked, giving all for that kind of variables. We built a sensor for that. We made custom nuts and bolts. If the vehicles are parked on main roads, we made sure that we built an algorithm which will tell us based on the speed of the road, whether it's a main road and whether it has a parking, and sends remote alert to us that someone is parking scooter on a main road where there's no parking. Because in India, you don't have data of what is legal parking, what is illegal parking remotely, right? So we used to have tech to make sure that people don't end trips, or if they end trip, they get an automatic call to saying that you're parked it in a particular zone, which is probably no parking. Why don't you look at it, kind of thing. So the kind of innovations that we've done is massive. So we had NFC kind of sensors for helmets because people were not keeping helmets back. So a lot of innovations, a lot of investments in all of this. Finally, we figured there are a few problems which you can't solve on fuel scooters, probably. That's why we started working on electric scooters early in the days.
Right. And you also invested a fair bit in sort of building out an ecosystem, right? I mean, you're working with mechanics, for example, you work with vehicle OEMs and so on, right? Could you talk us through some of those things?
Yeah, so one of the largest things that we have built is a battery swapping infra. Today, you can't see it because only Bounce uses it. So we have done close to about 500,000 battery swaps from 2020 to 2021 for electric scooters. We run close to 20 million kilometers on this network. So this is a network that we have built using mom and pop stores. Mom and pop stores can invest in batteries, chargers, and they can charge batteries, and they can be entrepreneurs as such, making money out of the EV transition which is happening. And we've also enabled there's something called as Nama Mechanic. We partnered with who onboard local mechanics. They are onboard on the app, so they can go out and do tasks. We work with multiple NGOs, which works on training women how to ride two-wheelers, and they can do battery swapping tasks for us. Now we are also now helping companies like Zomato and others to get part-time workers who are trained by Bounce on how to ride a two-wheeler and probably use Bounce for moving from point A to doing those deliveries as such. So quite a bit of work that we have done there. We've done quite a bit of work on Kirana. We've done quite a bit of work with mechanics, and these are a few things that I can quickly think of top of my mind.
Right. And, for a business that's based on movement, 2020 was when everything came to a halt, right? I mean, we had lockdowns and of course, the rest of the story is fairly well known. How did the business change during COVID? What did you tell your team and what did you do as an innovation, to get out of this?
Yeah. So we tried quite a bit of things, but what we could logically do was to make sure that vehicles are used by delivery folks as such. That's the logical thing that we did because deliveries was something which was happening well, and they wanted more and more people, etc. All of that. So we work with most of the delivery companies to give us scooters, which people could, without scooters, they could come and become partners and probably make money doing deliveries. We also enabled people to rent out their vehicles because most of the scooters were parked, so they could partner with us and give to a delivery partner and make money while the vehicle is parked instead of it being parked and being used by a delivery boy. Other than that, we doubled down and invested a lot on electric vehicles because we felt that there's nothing much you could do on mobility while the whole country is under lockdown, etc. So we doubled down, started working on EV. We acquired an electric vehicle manufacturer. We did quite a bit of work 2020 and 2021 on making sure that our electric vehicles are there and ready. So as you know, we are launching scooters not just for Bounce users, but for general public. So now people can buy scooters from Bounce, and we are calling it Bounce Infinity. And so there are infinite options of having access to this vehicle. It can be right from ownership, subscription, rent to own, or the vanilla pay for the bike and keep it kind of thing, right? And also with battery, without battery. So we have very unique things, and we felt the name Infinite makes sense. So we called it Bounce Infinity. And this is something that we are launching 2nd December. We'll open bookings for this. And we're super excited. We are doing a pan-India launch of our Bounce Infinity scooters. And we did quite a bit of work in 2020 and 2021 for that. So 2022 will be more of seeing that take off and see more of Bounce Infinity on the roads.
Amazing. Hello, everyone. You can get back to your regular programming in less than a minute. An interesting newsletter that I came across is The Gist. The Gist basically curates and explains the most important business and startup news from India in a very fun way. Their articles are very comprehensive. They cover all the important points, but aren't so long that it becomes boring to read. I believe it's a great way for young professionals or students to keep in touch with the ever-evolving and changing landscape of India's business and startup ecosystem. So head over to The Gist, that's gyst.com, and let me know what you think. The link is in the show notes. So you mentioned electric, and I have to talk to you about the electric vehicle landscape in India, right? And seems to be a lot of activity around it. And we've recently started seeing, some of the larger players also start making active investments, right? And we had for instance, Mr. Rajiv Bajaj also mentioned a few things. And there was a lot of press around that, right? Very interesting comments and everything. How do you see the EV landscape in India at this point of time?
See, I think transition to cleaner energy is very important from everyone's point of view. Apart from that, particularly from government point of view, the kind of money dollars which is being spent on fossil fuels really doesn't make sense. So government is also looking at how can they save a lot of forex by making sure that the energy transition can happen, etc. All of that. So I think climate change, forex bills, rising fuel prices, given all of that, there is definitely need to switch to alternate energy. What is that alternate energy going to be? One is electric. While we are seeing talks around hydrogen, etc., probably it may take some time for us to get there. But I think this is something that the ball has set rolling, and this is something that we can't undo as such. And everyone's good to look towards cleaner energy, etc. I think EV enables cleaner energy as well. While we talk about coal today being the primary power generator, etc., that I think the electric vehicles will enable you to actually move towards clean energy. All renewables are intermittent in terms of generation. So battery storage will play a very important role for not just for electric vehicles, but also for renewable energy generators as such. So it's like, I think the last time the energy transition happened was probably in 1800s, right? While when we moved from probably steam to coal or something of that sort, right? As in, we moved from steam to electricity or something of that sort. So, and I think the energy transition is happening now, while we will move from fossil fuels or something else. And it's once in a century kind of, or once in a millennium kind of transition, which is going to happen. So interesting times. We'll have to see. Everyone will place their bets. We'll have to see what takes off, etc. But very interesting times. We all should be happy that we are in such wonderful times when some transition is happening.
Absolutely. So I have to come back to the oats remark, right? And and there seems to be a weird sort of a cooperation, competition sort of a dynamic happening, right? I think the way I look at it, I think all the startups are being like extremely cooperative, and they're all trying to take on the incumbents, and I think it's. Either way, I think it's very, very healthy for the ecosystem. I think the cost of innovation will come down, right, with more people getting in, and I think it's a net positive anyway. But how do you sort of see do you guys talk to each other about stuff like this, or how do you think about competition and so on?
Yeah, I think we are big believers of collaboration. There's no point trying to reinvent wheel if you could share knowledge and make it happen. So we'll compete and also collaborate. So that's how most of the startups work. And benefit with all of this taking off, EV acceleration happening, it's only good for the country. And more innovation will happen, more dollars being spent. So it's always a good thing for the country and for everyone as such. So whether it's oats or masala dosa, or whatever, right? It doesn't matter. And people have to take stands. And I'm very glad that startups like Ola, Ather has done tremendous work right from early days. And Ola has shown that it can become massive, and anyone can take up and say that, okay, we're going to go after this. So I think that's the true spirit of entrepreneurship, right? Where you're not scared of who the incumbents are. You just look at the vision, and you look at how large the market is, and you go after it. You don't really bother about who you're competing with. And I think we also, all startups have this, at least all startups at least have this nothing to lose kind of attitude and everything to gain, right? So I think all startups have this one thing in common, and everyone will do the best possible stuff to go and reach their vision and dream that they want to. And it's a David versus Goliath kind of thing. And both of them have their own benefits, right? As in, David can move fast, Goliath can't, but is huge. So it's going to be interesting times. So both have their own capabilities and shortfalls. So, and let's see how. But at least here, the output always will be good. So everyone is working on EV, so the output is definitely going to be good, which means more dollars being spent. With what Ola did, I think the incumbents are also pressurized to invest in R&D. They're all cash rich; they can invest, which is good. So more investments, more R&D, more output, etc. All that, right? So it's only good. So I'm very happy that all of this is happening. It's a good time to see all of this happening.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, actually. There's also a lot of regulatory tailwinds as well, right? I mean, we've seen quite a lot of push from the government as well with the FAME subsidies. And,
yes.
Even recently, I mean, I think the Transport Minister, Gadkari ji, also said that EV cost will be on par with petrol vehicles in a couple of years. There are also all these various kind of numbers floating around, right? By 2030, some X% of vehicles will be EV on the road and so on. Yeah. So are you also...
Yeah, I think government has done a good job on pushing for EV adoption, EV acceleration as such, not just by speaking, probably even subsidies. And I was talking to a few governments, and the governments are talking about mandating EV for commercial vehicles to begin with. I think Goa is talking about by 2025, 100% of two-wheelers being electric there. They have very good targets that they're working on, chasing on. And even all governments have been very receptive and vocal, and they're taking suggestions, feedback, all that. So Karnataka government is working with us, and few folks like Amazon, etc. And we all went together to Karnataka government and asked for subsidy for retrofit. So one of the things that we are working on is converting existing vehicles into petrol vehicles into EV. So government of Karnataka is giving subsidies, which would be a great thing for delivery boys to accelerate and move to EV without having to worry about buying a new vehicle as such. So this is something which is being replicated across India now. All state governments are coming up and saying that they'll give subsidy for retrofit. Central government is also doing that. So quite a bit of effort from the government. I think government can play a very important role here. And government pushing the right things, I think India can become a hub for a lot of innovation in terms of be it battery tech, motor tech, or just the EV assets. So there's more to do. I hope all of us can pitch in and come up with something great in the next coming years.
Right. So you already spoke about a few things, but I'd love to know some more plans for the future, right? I mean, you said Bounce Infinity, December first week perhaps, and this expansion to other countries and so on, you've already made some moves on that front. Could you talk us through some of the things that will happen over the next 2 to 4 years at Bounce?
Yeah. So we visit on a lot of learnings, innovation, mobile tech, etc. All of that around shared mobility and the battery tech, battery swapping, and also now electric vehicles, right? So we've been working with companies across globe on helping them with this tech. So we recently signed an MOU with a Turkish company to help them with vehicles, help them with battery tech, help them with swapping tech, and also help them with certain apps that we have built for a lot of things which is useful for them. Apart from that, in terms of whole scheme of things, Bounce Infinity, we are starting with one model. Very soon, there's a second model that we'll be launching. So there's one particular model which is built for delivery and mobility use case across the globe. So this is a model that we're planning to export and solve for, and which will be used in India as well. And one of the unique things that we are offering is you're talking about Gadkari's remark on electric vehicles costing lesser than petrol scooters. So we have already solved for this by separating the battery from the equation. So one of the solutions that we have is where we give the scooter without the battery to the consumers, and for battery they pay per swap, like how they pay for fuel today. Because of which we are able to price it almost 40% cheaper than petrol scooters. Wow. So yeah, so Honda Activa will cost you 80,000 or 88,000. These vehicles will cost you anywhere from 36 to 40,000 depending on which state you are in, etc. So including energy for 1 or 2 years, we could price it at 60, 70,000. It's already cheaper than petrol scooters. Yeah.
Fantastic. So, at every stage of the journey, the founder has to reinvent himself or herself, right? In order to prep for growth to the next level. What are some of the high level challenges that you are solving as a founder?
There's no specific things, but you gotta. It's a learning thing, right? As in, you gotta how to hire. You gotta learn a lot of things. You gotta stay relevant. So there are a lot of learnings that founders go through on a day-to-day basis. It's always a learning curve, not just for founders, for everyone in the startup, right? So it's always a learning thing that we go through. So learning has been immense. If not anything, starting up will give you a very accelerated growth in all aspects of life as such. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. You are passionate about giving back to the Indian startup ecosystem, and especially it was super relevant in 2020 when a lot of people were facing a very difficult time as well. How are you keeping this effort sort of ongoing beyond 2020 also?
Yeah. So during 2020, we did a bunch of us started coviddonors.org, which was able to do a couple of $1 million worth of P2P grants where people could donate to someone else. We powered this through our tech platform. So during COVID, we'll all get busy in our lives, right? So one of the things that we've been thinking is how do we give X amount of our time towards larger problems, which otherwise we don't usually think about, which is beyond our company, etc. So that's something that we constantly work on. We are also helping a lot of founders who want some kind of guidance, mentorship to come to Bounce and work with our leadership, brainstorm with them, etc. All of that. So that's access that which usually is not out there, right? So we have a very open kind of thing. So where anyone can come talk to us. If we think we can help, we will start giving them access to our leadership. They can just stick around or even work with Bounce to get some ideas, etc. All that. So we've been super open around how we can help, etc. Either we connect them to investors or help them with wherever they are. And recently we've got one Zomato delivery boy who had an idea around a tech startup. We didn't know he was a Zomato delivery boy, but he had a fantastic idea, and we felt all he needs is some kind of mentoring. And so he works out of our office. We have space, so he works out of here, and he also gets to access all the leadership. And he's launching his app in a couple of weeks now. So we are super happy that he's doing that. Yeah. So we'll do whatever we can, and we'll encourage more and more people to pitch in and do whatever they can.
Right. Final couple of questions. What are some books or podcasts that you would recommend?
Oh, I really used to like How I Built This with Gairas. That's a fantastic podcast. I've heard the most amazing founders speak there. The Growth Handbook, I guess, Elad Gill is a fantastic one which everyone should have. The Great CEO Within from, I don't remember the author's name, Matt something. The Great CEO Within is fantastic. It's a very tiny book, fantastic guidance on how to run a company, how should CEO look at things, etc. High Output Management is a no-brainer. Again, High Output Management is also a fantastic book. And also a lot of biographies. Shoe Dog is one of my favorite. Took me through COVID times. Hard Things About Hard Things. Again, is a beautiful book. So yeah, you gotta read biographies to realize that everyone goes through shit, and you gotta read books which will help you get better as well. So these are a few books I could think of. Other than this, the podcast was How I Built This with Gairas was something close to my heart when I was starting off. Yeah, I think these are the things that I read or I continue to read, but these are the books top of mind. I can suggest that everyone should be reading.
Sure. So before we leave you, why should someone join Bounce?
It's pretty simple, right? As in, they can join any startup which they like as such, or they can start on their own. But at Bounce, what we do is we chase crazy dreams, and we believe that together we can go after it. And we're doing some exciting stuff in EV, which can change the way people move, give access to mobility for all. And access to mobility is access to livelihoods, and solving for access to mobility is a large and hard problem. So if people love problems, as in crazy tough problems which probably has not been solved for, that Bounce is a place to work. I'm sure every startup says this, but I think by enabling people to move, you're enabling livelihoods is what we believe. And it's a large and interesting problem to solve for. And that's one reason they could join Bounce for. Yeah, apart from that, we also help people discover themselves probably, and they can join Bounce knowing that they want to quit and start something on their own. So we always welcome people who want to start on their own. So we kind of and we don't have any concept of pedigree. So anyone can do anything in Bounce as long as they're not performing operations. Fortunately, we are not a hospital, so we don't have to worry about that. But other than that, anyone can do anything, and we enable them to try out multiple roles, etc. So they don't have to worry about pedigree, they don't have to worry about background, whether they've done it before, etc. So we just evaluate people for who they are and where they are, and how can we enable them to get to where they want to. So that's the kind of place Bounce is. So.
Fantastic. Yeah, this has been a fascinating conversation, Vivek. I mean, more than a couple of things stick out for me. The fact that you guys have been super fearless, right? Unafraid to pick on a big problem, right? And unafraid to experiment, and always trying to stay 2 steps ahead, right? And execute so very well and very deliberately, right? So fantastic work, and wish you all the best for everything that you have coming up.
Thanks, Roshan. Thanks, pleasure. Thanks for taking your time for us. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much for listening. If you liked this episode, then don't forget to subscribe to us on your favorite platform and share this episode with all of your fellow startup operators. Also, follow the Startup Operator on LinkedIn and Twitter for more updates. Stay safe, take care, and see you soon on a brand new episode of the Startup Operator.